Now, as I told you earlier, Eleni Jokos is at the World Economic Forum on Africa in Cape Town. And Eleni, it's interesting, this report. Certainly one country that reflects much of what has come out of this report is our neighbour Zimbabwe.
Absolutely, and it's all about mineral resources and wealth for the African continent and how that trickles down to the layperson as well. But joining us, we have Zimbabwe Prime Minister Morgan Tsvangirai. Thank you, sir, for joining us. Great to have you with us on eNCA. How is it that a country as rich as Zimbabwe, with so much agricultural land and mineral resource wealth, is in the situation that it is right now? Surely it should be far richer.
Absolutely, but you have to understand that it's a crisis of governance, it's a crisis of leadership. And the reason why we are engrossed in this kind of crisis is because of the policy conflicts that have existed in the country and the dispute around the elections that have plunged the country to where it is.
Are we going to see elections happening this year, and is it going to be a watershed moment in terms of turning the fortunes around for Zimbabwe?
Yes, I think this is going to be a watershed election, insofar as that we have been under curatorship of SADC and AU for the last 4 years, and that when the global political agreement was agreed upon, it was to try to soft land the crisis so that we can actually get out of the crisis. And so, yes, this election will be conducted this year, and that we are all looking forward to a peaceful, free and fair and credible and legitimate election.
Well, if past elections anything to go by, a very good chance of you, of course, taking on the role and leading the country. But the big question is, are your opponents going to accept it?
Well, it's not the question of choice by our opponents. It's a question of whether we are all committed this time around to ensure that we protect the vote, we protect the voter, and we protect the outcome of the vote. And that is the respect of the people's will. That's the democrat. Why do we go in this election process if we, in the end, we try to undermine and subvert the will of the people?
We've seen violence playing out. We've actually seen harassment coming to the fore even prior to elections as well. How is this going to be contained? What is your view in terms of what is playing out?
I think we have largely condemned by the public position taken by the leadership of all the political parties to commit ourselves to a peaceful election. In November of 11, about 2 years ago, we made a public pledge that no violence, that we need a peaceful election in order to get out of the crisis. And we hope that with the joint monitoring group that is monitoring our elections at various levels, that this message is cascaded down to the lower structures of all our political parties. And that if anything is anything to go by, what has already happened is that there is peaceful coexistence, in spite of some of the overzealous actions of some of the elements who would like to subvert a very peaceful process that is moving forward.
In the Africa Progress report, we actually saw Zimbabwe coming out as one of the countries where there are concerns about resource revenues and whether they are going to the right places. As an example, let's look at the Morangi diamond fields. Are we seeing all the revenues from this diamond field going through Treasury?
No, I think it's common cause that we are all concerned about the way the diamond revenue is being accounted for. There's lack of transparency. However, I think there is an effort by the inclusive government to try to arrest it. We have, for instance, set out the Minister of Finance, the Minister of Mines, to at least evaluate and find a way in which revenues that have already been generated are able to come to the Ministry of Finance, to the fiscus, as it were. But it has been difficult. I accept that some of the revenues may have found themselves in pockets which has prejudiced the whole nation, and that's unacceptable.
Under your leadership, how would this change? What are you going to do? What is the first point of action?
First and foremost, we need to look at our diamond law. There is no diamond law. We need to look at our Mines and Minerals Act with the review of increasing accountability of these resources. These are national resources that every Zimbabwean should benefit. If Botswana can point out and say, we have benefited from our diamond, why can't we do the same? If South Africa can point to diamond revenue, why can't we do the same? So the question of yardsticks of accountability are very, very important. And if we can stem the corruption in the deals, I think we'll be able to make these resources available to the nation.
We've seen economic difficulties playing out, and even the finance minister has appealed for assistance so many times. Yeah. Let's talk about funding on the elections. How is this going to be funded?
Yes, I think there are financial resources. As far as the Minister of Finance has been repeatedly been complaining about lack of resources that are available for the elections. But I think that we are going to mobilize internal resources. There are possibilities of being creative in mobilizing internal resources. But I think that it's not going to be adequate. So one of the avenues that is available is continue to look for external support.
Have you received external support thus far?
Not yet, but I think that it is an alternative that we'll have to look at.
12 million people in Zimbabwe right now. You've got a lot of people in the diaspora. What are you going to do to get your people with skills back into the country?
Well, any post-political conflict which has resulted in a lot of citizens leaving the country, you will have to have a diaspora policy, and you will have to create the necessary political and economic conditions for those people who have been forced by circumstances of political persecution, economic conditions to go outside the country. You have to create internal mechanisms to attract them back. It is obvious that we have suffered a lot of brain drain. And I think here in South Africa, you have been the beneficiary. And I think it will be important for us to create conditions for those Zimbabweans to see hope again in the future.
Prime Minister, when do you expect a significant turnaround? Have you got targets in place? What is your timeline?
Well, under my leadership, I think we can project a very positive turnaround. I think we have got a good plan. We have got a jobs plan. We have got an economic plan. That will see the country turn around very quickly. Maybe in the first 2 or 3 years, things would start turn around very quickly, because it is not a one-day wonder. You have to lay the basis. You have to be clear about what you want to lay down. And you have to project also a certain positive image to those that will be doing the investment and the growth.
Fantastic, Prime Minister. Thank you very much for speaking to us. Much appreciated for your time, Zimbabwe Prime Minister Morgan Tsvangirai, speaking to us and giving us a 2 to 3 year timeline. If he takes on the leadership role later on this year after elections, a country once known as the breadbasket of Africa.
News that moves. eNCA.com.